There are places deep in Kentucky where the forest still feels untouched, where the hills swallow sound, where fog settles into the hollers so thick it feels alive. Places where old folks used to warn their children not to stay out after dark. Not because of bears, not because of moonshiners, but because of something else. Something tall, something covered in hair, something that walked like a man, but wasn't one. And for decades, long before the internet, before podcasts, before television specials, people across Kentucky whispered about strange creatures watching them from the trees. Hunters, coal miners, truck drivers, farmers, children, entire families. Some described glowing eyes. Some heard screams echoing through the mountains. Others found footprints too large to belong to any human alive. And a few claimed they looked directly into the face of something they could never explain. Tonight, we're diving deep into some of the most terrifying and believable Bigfoot encounters ever reported in Kentucky. From the dense wilderness of Daniel Boone National Forest to isolated farms hidden in the Appalachian hills to forgotten roads where something still walks after midnight. These aren't just campfire stories anymore, because the deeper you dig into Kentucky folklore, the more one terrifying possibility begins to emerge. Maybe something really is out there, and maybe it has been here all along. Welcome back to Kentucky Melody, where the mountains remember better than we do, and the stories never truly die. And before we step into tonight's dark Appalachian mystery, we just want to say how excited we are to see so many of y'all at the Red River Gorge Bigfoot Fest in Stanton, Kentucky on Saturday, May 30th, 2026. We'll be there sharing stories, meeting fellow believers, and celebrating the strange legends that still roam these hills. Tonight's journey takes us deep into the darkest forests and strangest encounters Kentucky has to offer. So, turn down the lights, settle in close, and listen carefully. Because somewhere beyond the tree line, something may be listening too. Before America ever settled on the name Bigfoot, people across the mountains and forest already had their own names for the creature. And honestly, that may be one of the strongest arguments that something strange has been seen for generations, because isolated communities, many with little connection to one another, kept describing the same type of being, a massive, hair-covered, human-like creature living deep in the wilderness. Only the names changed. In Kentucky, older mountain families often called it a woodbooger. That name carried a different feeling than modern Bigfoot stories. A woodbooger wasn't just some mysterious animal. It was something parents warned children about. Something that lurked near tree lines and hollers after dark. In parts of Appalachia, people spoke the word almost cautiously, like they didn't want to attract its attention. Some said woodboogers threw rocks. Others claimed they screamed in the night, and many described them as intelligent enough to avoid people unless provoked. Further east in Appalachian folklore, another name appeared again and again. The Yahoo. According to Kentucky legend, even Daniel Boone himself supposedly described killing a giant hairy creature he called a Yahoo near what is now known as Yahoo Falls in Kentucky. The name came from Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, where savage wild men were called Yahoos. But Boone's alleged story spread deep into Appalachian folklore, and over time, the creature itself became part of Kentucky legend. Some old-timers claimed Yahoos were larger and more aggressive than typical Bigfoot reports. Mountain devils, hairy giants, wild men living in the cliffs and forests. Then there's the terrifying name, the hillbilly beast, one of Kentucky's most infamous modern Bigfoot legends. Witnesses described it as towering between 8 and 10 feet tall, with dark hair, orange glowing eyes, and horrifying screams echoing through the hills. Some reports claimed it beat on trees at night. Others described massive tracks appearing near isolated farms and wooded ridges. And, unlike many Bigfoot stories, the hillbilly beast became deeply connected to fear in rural Kentucky communities, especially among people who claim they saw it with their own eyes. Western Kentucky produced another chilling name, the Spottsville Monster, a creature many locals believed stalked the river bottoms and wooded areas near Henderson County. Witnesses described glowing red eyes, immense speed, and a creature that seemed almost supernatural in the way it appeared and vanished. Some families reportedly refused to go outside after dark during the height of the sightings. And Kentucky wasn't alone. Cross the river into Ohio, and people spoke about the grassman. The Ohio grassman was often described as a violent cousin of Bigfoot. Enormous, aggressive, known for weaving grass nests in remote wilderness areas. Some witnesses claim the grassmen threw rocks or chased people from isolated roads. In the southern swamps, people use names like the skunk ape, the swamp stalker, the boggy creek monster. Out west, there were stories of the Mogollon monster, the big muddy monster, the Honey Island swamp monster, and deep in the mountains of Appalachia, some simply called them wild men, hairy men, the old men of the mountain. Different names, different accents, different locations, but the descriptions remained disturbingly similar. A towering hairy creature, human-like, intelligent, fast, watching from the trees, and maybe the strangest part of all, many of these legends existed long before television, before movies, before the internet connected isolated communities together, which raises a terrifying possibility. What if these weren't just stories being copied from one place to another? What if people across America, and especially deep in Appalachia, were all encountering the same thing? And the deeper you travel into Kentucky's mountains, the more the stories begin to change. Because eventually, people stop talking about hearing something in the woods and start talking about being hunted by it. The Daniel Boone National Forest stretches across more than 700,000 acres of rugged wilderness. Steep ravines, massive sandstone cliffs, hidden caves, dense forests, remote hollers where a person could disappear and never be found. And over the years, this area has produced some of Kentucky's strangest Bigfoot reports. One of the most famous came from a group of campers near the Red River Gorge area in the late 1970s. The group had set up camp near a remote trail far from the main tourist areas. According to later interviews, everything seemed normal until around midnight. That's when they heard something heavy moving through the woods, not walking, pacing, slowly circling their camp. At first, they assumed it was a bear, but then one of them noticed something strange. The footsteps sounded too deliberate, too human. Snap, pause, like something intelligent was carefully watching them. Then came the smell. Several witnesses later described an overpowering odor, like wet dog mixed with rotten garbage and decaying leaves. One camper shined a flashlight toward the tree line, and for just a moment, he claimed he saw two reflective eyes staring back from nearly 7 feet above the ground. The figure reportedly moved behind a tree, then disappeared without making another sound. None of the campers slept that night. By morning, they discovered several large footprints pressed into the mud near camp, human-like, but enormous. Some reportedly measured over 16 inches long. The group packed up and left immediately. Years later, one witness still refused to camp alone in Kentucky woods, and, according to friends, even decades later, the man still locked his doors before sunset any time he visited the gorge. Because some fears don't fade with time. They wait. One of the most common elements in Kentucky Bigfoot reports isn't visual sightings. It's the sounds. People across the Daniel Boone region have described screams unlike anything they'd ever heard. Not coyotes, not bobcats, not mountain lions. Something else. Hunters especially report these encounters during the colder months. In Wolfe County, several hunters in the 1990s described hearing long guttural screams echoing through the hills after sunset. One witness compared it to a woman screaming and a gorilla roaring at the same time. Another claimed the sound was powerful enough to vibrate through his chest. What terrified them most was how the screams moved. One moment, the sound seemed half a mile away. Seconds later, it sounded incredibly close. Too close. As if whatever made it was moving through the forest far faster than any human could. Some hunters abandoned their blinds entirely. Others stopped hunting certain areas after dark, and these stories continue today. Modern hikers in the Red River Gorge occasionally describe hearing strange vocalizations deep in isolated areas of the forest. Most never report it publicly, because in small towns, people don't want to be labeled crazy. But privately, the stories keep circulating. And the deeper these stories spread across Kentucky, the stranger they became. Because eventually, people stopped describing something merely animal and started describing something that felt almost supernatural. One of Kentucky's strangest creature legends emerged from Spottsville in Henderson County during the 1970s. Locals began reporting a massive hairy creature with glowing red eyes. Witnesses described it as towering over fences, crossing roads in just a few steps, and vanishing impossibly fast. Unlike many Bigfoot stories, the Spottsville Monster developed quickly into a regional panic. Entire families claimed encounters. Dogs reportedly refused to enter certain wooded areas. Some residents even armed themselves after dark. One famous report involved a family driving near the river late one evening. According to their account, a massive creature stepped from the tree line and crossed directly in front of their vehicle. The father later described its stride as almost unnatural, not running, not stumbling, but gliding with terrifying speed. The headlights reportedly illuminated reddish glowing eyes and dark hair covering the creature's entire body. Then it disappeared in nearby woods. No sound, no crashing through brush, just gone. Law enforcement reportedly investigated several sightings during that period, but no explanation was ever found. And while skeptics blamed hoaxes or misidentified animals, many locals remained convinced something real was there. Even today, older residents in the area still quietly discuss the sightings, especially after dark. Some reportedly still avoid certain roads near the river bottoms after midnight, not because they expect to see something, but because they're afraid they might. Coal miners in Appalachia have long carried stories outsiders rarely hear. Deep underground, in isolated mountain communities, miners often developed intense superstitions, and among those stories were reports of giant hairy beings seen near remote mine entrances and mountain ridges. In Harlan County, during the 1960s, a miner reportedly encountered something enormous while driving home before dawn. The man later told friends he saw a huge figure standing upright beside the road near a wooded ridge. At first, he assumed it was a bear, until it stepped across the ditch on two legs. The witness reportedly slammed on his brakes. The creature turned toward him, and he claimed its eyes reflected yellow in the headlights. Then it walked into the trees. Not ran, walked calmly, as if it wasn't afraid of him at all. The miner refused to drive that road alone afterward. Stories like this became surprisingly common in isolated coal communities, especially in places where dense forest bordered abandoned mining land. Some miners even claimed they heard strange whistles and screams near old strip mines at night. And perhaps the strangest detail of all, many described feeling watched before encounters occurred, a deep, instinctive fear, like prey realizing a predator is nearby. One retired miner from Bell County reportedly described the sensation this way. You'd feel it before you saw anything. The woods would go quiet, and suddenly you knew something else was in there with you. And in Appalachia, people learned to trust feelings like that. For decades, Kentucky has produced alleged Bigfoot footprints. Some were eventually dismissed. Others remain unexplained. In Bell County, near Pine Mountain, a family discovered enormous tracks crossing muddy farmland after heavy rain. The prints reportedly showed distinct toe impressions, stride lengths far larger than normal human movement, and no obvious signs of fakery. Local newspapers briefly covered the incident. Then the story faded. In another case, near Moorhead, hikers discovered a line of giant footprints leading toward thick woods before abruptly stopping near rocky terrain. No return tracks, no explanation, just gone. Some researchers argue this is common in Bigfoot reports, as creatures may intentionally move through rocky creeks or harder terrain to avoid leaving tracks. Whether that's true or not, Kentucky's terrain certainly offers ideal conditions for something to remain hidden. Massive forests, thousands of caves, sparse mountain populations, and enormous stretches of land difficult to search thoroughly, especially at night. And maybe that's what unsettles people the most. Not the possibility that something exists out there, but the realization that Kentucky may be large enough to hide it. One of the most chilling Kentucky Bigfoot reports came from a lone camper near Cave Run Lake. The man reportedly chose a remote camping location far from other people. According to his account, everything seemed peaceful until around 2 a.m. That's when he woke to heavy footsteps outside his tent. Not animal sounds, footsteps, slow, measured, crunch, crunch, crunch. He froze. The footsteps circled the tent several times, then stopped directly outside. The witness later claimed he could hear breathing, deep, heavy, almost growling. Then came a sudden violent slam against the side of the tent. The camper grabbed a flashlight and shouted. Silence. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then whatever stood outside released an explosive scream that the witness later described as the most terrifying sound I've ever heard in my life. The footsteps retreated rapidly into the forest, At daylight, the camper discovered large impressions in the ground around the campsite. He packed immediately and drove straight home. And, according to people who knew him, he never camped alone again. Years later, the man reportedly still refused to sleep near an open tent flap. Friends said he kept floodlights installed around his property until the day he died. And whenever anyone asked him what happened out there near Cave Run Lake, he always gave the same answer. It knew I was inside that tent, and it wanted me to know it knew. And honestly, that may be the most terrifying part of all. Not that something was out there, but that it understood exactly how frightened he was. You might assume these stories faded away decades ago. They didn't. Modern reports continue across Kentucky, especially near Red River Gorge, land between the lakes, Daniel Boone National Forest, Pine Mountain, Big South Fork, and the isolated backroads stretching through Appalachia. Today, many sightings spread quietly through social media groups and local conversations rather than newspapers. And, interestingly, many modern witnesses don't even want publicity. Some refuse interviews entirely. Others share their stories anonymously because they fear ridicule. Yet certain details repeat again and again. The smell, the screams, the feeling of being watched. Large footprints, tree knocks, rock throwing, massive upright figures crossing roads at impossible speeds, and perhaps most disturbing of all, many witnesses insist these creatures display intelligence, not animal behavior, calculated behavior, watching from concealment, avoiding open exposure, retreating strategically, almost as if they understand humans far better than we understand them. One hiker near Red River Gorge reportedly described hearing heavy footsteps paralleling him for nearly 20 minutes along an isolated trail. Every time he stopped walking, the footsteps stopped too. When he moved again, they continued, perfectly matching his pace. He never saw anything, but he later admitted he ran the final mile back to his vehicle. Another modern witness claimed he discovered massive handprints pressed against the dusty side of an abandoned hunting cabin near the Daniel Boone National Forest boundary. The prints were reportedly too large and too high to belong to any normal person, and according to him, the strangest part wasn't the prints, it was the feeling, the overwhelming certainty that something had been watching him long before he ever noticed the cabin, because again and again, that same phrase keeps appearing in witness testimony. I felt watched. And in the deep forests of Kentucky, that feeling can become unbearable. That question has haunted researchers for decades. Believers argue Bigfoot could represent an unknown primate species surviving in remote wilderness. Others believe these creatures may be relic hominids, something closer to ancient human ancestors. But some theories grow even stranger. Certain witnesses describe impossible behavior, creatures vanishing suddenly, appearing silently, displaying awareness beyond normal animal intelligence. This has led some researchers toward paranormal theories, interdimensional entities, spiritual beings, something connected to ancient folklore itself. And honestly, Kentucky may be one of the few places where those theories feel strangely possible, because Appalachia has always carried stories of things living beyond the edges of human understanding. Witches, haints, little people, phantom lights, strange creatures in the hills. The mountains themselves seem to preserve old fears, and maybe old truths. Some researchers even believe Kentucky's massive cave systems may play a role in these encounters. Miles upon miles of underground passages, hidden entrances swallowed by forest, entire sections of wilderness where a creature could theoretically travel unseen. And when you stand in some of these remote areas at night, hearing only wind moving through the trees, it becomes easier to understand why these stories survive generation after generation, because the mountains themselves feel ancient, old enough to hide secrets, old enough to keep them. What stands out most in genuine witness interviews isn't excitement, it's fear, real fear. People often break down emotionally recounting these experiences years later. Hunters abandoning lifelong hunting spots, campers refusing to enter forests after dark, tough Appalachian men openly admitting they were terrified, because many describe the same overwhelming sensation that whatever they encountered was not supposed to exist, and yet somehow did. One witness from eastern Kentucky reportedly summed it up perfectly. He said, "I didn't feel like I saw an animal. I felt like something ancient saw me." And maybe that's why these encounters stay with people forever, because deep down, they force people to confront something unsettling. The possibility that human beings may not fully understand what still lives inside America's wilderness. Especially here in Appalachia. Especially here in Kentucky. So, what's really happening in Kentucky's forests? Misidentifications, hoaxes, legends growing larger over time, or is there truly something massive moving through the Appalachian wilderness when the sun goes down? Something intelligent, something hidden, something that has learned exactly how to avoid us. Maybe the answer is buried deep inside the forests of Daniel Boone National Forest, or somewhere beneath Kentucky's endless cave systems. And maybe that answer explains why these stories refuse to die, because generation after generation, people continue seeing something they cannot explain. Something tall, hair-covered, silent, watching from the trees. And if even a fraction of these encounters are true, then one terrifying possibility remains. We may not be alone in Kentucky's wilderness after all. Have you ever experienced something strange in the Kentucky woods? Have you heard screams in the hills, seen unexplained footprints, or felt like something was watching you from the darkness? If so, tell your story down in the comments, because some of the most terrifying Kentucky stories come from ordinary people. And if you enjoyed tonight's journey into the unknown, be sure to subscribe to Kentucky Melody for more legends, folklore, hauntings, cryptids, and dark Appalachian mysteries. And don't forget, we'd love to see y'all at the Red River Gorge Bigfoot Fest in Stanton, Kentucky on Saturday, May 30th, 2026. Come by the Kentucky Melody booth, share your stories, and celebrate the strange side of Appalachia with us. Until next time, stay out of the deep woods after dark, because you never know what may be walking beside you.